Om. 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 Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwara Guru Deva Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Yapi Yat Sarvam Trailokyam Sacharacharam Tatpadam Nishitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Shri Chinmaya Satgurave Namaha. Om Shri Chinmaya Satgurave Namaha. Om Shri Chinmaya Satgurave Namaha. Ramaya Ramabhadraya Ramachandraya Vedase Raghunataya Nataya Sitaya Pataye Namaha. Anjananandanam Veeram Janaki Shokanashnam Kapisham Akshahantaram Vande Lanka Bhayankaram. So we saw before the break that Bali had fought with Sugriv, and Ramchandraji helped Sugriv get the kingdom and fight or defend himself against Bali, you can say. And so here there's this, like, why, the question of why comes up. And one, Bali had asked Ramchandraji why, and Ramchandraji had said, explained, and that we did last class. But then the Devatas asked Brahmaji why, and especially the whole shooting from the back thing. And so even Brahmaji answered, let's see, we asked Vishnu to come down to destroy Ravana. That was the whole purpose of this avatar. Of course, an avatar is always more than one purpose. Like if you see in the Pura, in the whole Bhagavatam, then it is literally a day, less than. Kurma avatar also, just for this incident of cleaning, churning the ocean. Matsya avatar, of course, the whole deluge, but it's all the avatars actually are more incident based, like even Narsimha avatar, when it's just that it's not long, but Rama avatar, he lives a whole full life. And so, of course, it's the purpose, it can't be just to kill Ravana, because if the purpose was just to kill Ravana, then like with Narsimha avatar, he'd come, kill Ravana, go. They don't need to live for so many years just to do one act. The purpose of Rama avatar is obviously far more, and it's to show us how to live. That's why he lives this whole life. As a way to give us an ideal and a standard to be able to adhere to. So when the Devatas ask why, then one of the purposes is to kill Ravana. That's what Mother Earth had gone, right? As a cow to pray to Bhagwan Vishnu, please help, because Ravana is tormenting the earth and making the earth, the weight of the earth was getting so much. Devatas also went, that he's, using the Devatas as servants, then Bhagwan, please help. And then then the idea was that the devatas would also come down to earth to be able to help Ramchandraji during that avatar. So Indra came down as Bali. But before Ramchandraji even gets anywhere in the picture, Ravana comes to challenge Bali, and then he fights him, and then he becomes his friend. And then the purpose of coming down to earth was to help Ramchandraji destroy Ravana, and then this Bali went and became Ravana's friend, and then how he'll help now to be able to fulfill that purpose. So Brahmaji gives that reasoning for why Ramchandraji sends Bali back up to basically heaven, back to Indraloka. And so that incident, I don't know if I spoke about that incident. So that incident is much earlier, maybe a few years before this incident where Ramchandraji has come into the forest. We'll see it later in when just before the war is about to take place. But Bali is doing his Sandhya Vandan, which means he's in the river, holding the water, doing the Gayatri, putting the water into the river. And at that time, only Indra, Ravana, heard you are, this. Okay, so we were talking about Ravana, and then Bali had put Ravana in his armpit, and then they had a war, and then because they were both of the same temperament and they loved fighting, then they befriended each other. So Brahmaji's reasoning is different. Brahmaji's reasoning is that where you were supposed to go to be on Ramchandraji's side, and then you jumped camps. So then no need. You come back to heaven. It's always fascinating that when something happens, there's more than one reason for it to happen. And in our lives, we may not know any reason, like why has this happened? And somebody might provide what they think to be reason, but that's not necessary. Or could be that is one of the other reasons. But here the beautiful thing is, Bali accepts. Bali accepts Ramchandraji's reasoning, and he actually, Ramchandraji's in this absolute mood of beautiful surrender. And then Tara also gets knowledge from Ramchandraji. Radhe 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 Govinda. 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 Vrindavan Chanda. Vrindavan Chanda. Vrindavan Chanda. Vrindavan Chanda. Anathanatha Dina Bandhu Radhe Govinda. 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 Nandakumara Navanita Chora 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 Radhe Govinda. Vrindavan Chanda. Vrindavan Chanda. Vrindavan Chanda. Vrindavan Chanda. Anathanatha Dina Bandhu Radhe Govinda. 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 Radhe 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 Govinda. So Sugriv now is the king. And Ramchandraji was the one that was sent into exile. And so there's actually rules of being in exile. And one of the rules of being in exile is you can't enter a city. You have to stay in the forest. But since Lakshman and Sita ji weren't exiled, Ramchandraji sends Lakshman into the city of Kishkinda to do the coronation for Sugriv to become the king, and to help them set up and they also had to do the last rites for Bali. And so you see that this is very much that compassion that Ramchandraji has, that, Tara is grieving, Angad is grieving, the people of Kishkinda would be grieving their king. So the first thing is do the pujas for him. And then the kingdom should still be well maintained. So Sugriv now has to be coronated to become the king. And so he doesn't, of course, he's in pain. He's missing Sita ji. But there isn't this insistence of like, now I helped you, come on, you have to help me. There's understanding that there's a handing over in terms of administration. There'll be quirks in the system. Sugriv is meeting his wife after so long, so let them spend some time together. Although it's not Sugriv that goes into the forest to go look for Sita ji. So in a way, they could have still gone ahead with it. But Ramchandraji still has that compassion and that presence of mind that all things have to happen. And then, like I said, it starts raining. And during this rainy season, people usually stay in one place. Even swamis, rishis, yogis that used to wander around and not stay, for 3 months they would stay in one space when it's raining, because it really is very difficult. If you've lived in India monsoons, you'll know it really is difficult to be out and about during the monsoons. And it used to get taken as, during the monsoons, wherever the saints and sages stayed for those 3 months, they would do satsang. Continuously, there would be satsangs during that time. And so people actually looked forward, because monsoons, you can't do much else. So the saints and sages are also in one place, and so everyone would be doing satsang. And so here you see that the rains have started, and so Ramchandraji is living in this, like a cave in the outskirts of the city, and he follows this tradition. Him and Lakshman are doing satsang. And so there's some beautiful teachings based on nature. And that's why I said there's a lot of discussion here on nature. But there's also in between the story of everything reminds Ramchandraji of Sita ji, and he's missing Sita ji. And so when the rains finish, nothing will happen. But after the rains finish, then they would go search for Sita ji. So in terms of the story, that Sugriv kind of forgets, like the rains have stopped, but he's still not doing anything. He's still not doing anything. He's still not doing. And we do this, right? Like I always give this example of somebody wants to borrow my book. It's like, okay, here, and then don't expect it back. And it's not, people don't deliberately don't give it back. Maybe some do, but most don't deliberately not give it back. Most will just be like, they intend to give it back. They intend to give it back. They intend to, and then you just don't get around to doing things. So sometimes we intend to, but then it's just so low on our priority list of things to do that it doesn't get done. And so, in fact, when somebody says something and then they actually do it, we also think, oh, wow, so efficient. So we get nicely impressed. And it's supposed to be a quality of people who are successful. But when they intend to, they make sure they actually do it. And it doesn't just stay an intention. And so, yes, agree, is like the bulk of people where there was intention, but it doesn't get done. He doesn't actually, the rains have stopped. He doesn't get his army together, ready. Let's go look for Sita. He's forgotten. He's gotten the palace back. He's gotten, comfort back. He's gotten his wife back. So all of that is so much distraction. And And so Ramchandraji does this show of anger. And then, like, I'll teach Sugriva a lesson. But of course he doesn't. And then he tells Lakshman, okay, you go, but don't scold him too much. First, Ramchandraji only gets so angry, like this was supposed to, the rains have already stopped already almost a month now, and he still hasn't done anything. So Ramchandraji only gets really angry. And this is a beautiful incident when we think about, as I previously said, Ramchandraji's life is to teach us how to live. And when anger does come, because it's an emotion, and so it will, from time to time, it will raise its head and we will feel anger. And so Ramchandraji feels anger, but he doesn't act on it. While he's angry, he doesn't act on it. He waits for himself to calm down, and then he tells Lakshman, go and tell Sugriva that the rains have stopped, and shouldn't you be fulfilling your promise? But of course, seeing Ramchandraji angry, Lakshman, of course, just needs any excuse. But to see, like, even in terms of, like, the whole story, when we talk about Ramchandraji being this ideal of dharma, and so much of how to manage ourselves, when to talk, when not to talk, how to talk, how to manage when we are feeling emotions, then, So Lakshman goes into the city. But before even Lakshman arrives, Hanumanji has already been looking at Sugriva, indulging in this life of kingly pleasures, and then thinks, he's forgotten. So Hanumanji already tells him, this is wrong what you're doing. You had given a promise, you have to fulfill your promise. Ramchandraji is sitting there in the cave waiting for his wife. Just because you got your wife back, this doesn't mean you can neglect your duties. And even if he wasn't waiting there, you shouldn't be neglecting your duties. Yeah. And the timing is incredible because Hanumanji is almost so tuned into Ramchandraji. But Ramchandraji's anger had just probably barely started, and Hanumanji already knew, and Hanumanji is not near Ramchandraji. He's in the palace with Sugriva, and so he's already told Sugriva. And then Sugriva's like, you're right. Okay, let's go do something. But too late for Sugriva to come to that understanding, because Lakshman's already in the city, in the palace, and he's twang his bow. And so apparently just the sound of that bow twanging is like a roar, and it strikes so much fear in people's hearts. And you get this description about Arjuna's Gandiva bow, just one tongue of and then the enemies would already start their knees shaking and their sweat breaks out. And so Lakshman's bow, definitely no less, and Lakshman's strength, definitely no less. And so I don't know if this is the humorous version of how it's being told, or I'm not sure which version of the Ramayana it is, but Sugriva hides under the bed. Like kids who are scared of monsters, and they hide under the bed. Must be the palace is very clean, because most beds aren't that clean. But he hides under the bed. And so Lakshman walks into the room where Sugriva should have been, and Sugriva's under the bed. Hanuman's standing there like with his face like, oh, like how embarrassing to have a kid, a king that's hiding. But it also, the twang of the bow would really invoke that much fear. But the main thing is, like, so this is, like, you can read the Ramayana from so many different perspectives. And of course, we're going to focus on a spiritual perspective, but every now and then it's nice to take a note of, like, in terms of how we handle our emotions. So Ramchandraji got angry, and that's an emotion. And how did he handle it? He little bit vented to Lakshman, but then he calmed down, and then he made a decision with such clarity of mind. And he tells Lakshman, don't really scold, just go show. So he knows that we cannot be taken for granted, right? And due respect should be given. But don't actually hurt anyone. And that's why Lakshman didn't even take an arrow out of his quiver. So there was never going to be any violence. Like Lakshman's, although excited to be doing this job, he follows orders to the letter. And so no actual arrows taken out, just the string is twanged, and that's already enough to get everyone's attention. And then Sugriv has an emotion, fear, and he reacts, hides under the bed. It's like to be able to see our emotions, like Ramchandraji being this role model for us to be able to follow. And then still to be able to think clearly. Whereas when we give in to emotions, then like Sugriv, it's it would have been embarrassing. But more than embarrassing, it's you give in to fear is, the reaction to fear is run away. You give in to it, right? Reaction to anger is violence. And we give in to it. Whether it's in our thoughts or in our actions, we give in to it. So maybe with violence and anger, we don't give in to the physical violence, although many people do, huh? Like I'll see sometimes even the kids, like they'll get scolded in class and then they're so angry with me, like how dare I scold them, which is this new breed of kids now. They'll take their bag or they'll take their book and they'll bang it on the floor. Right? So the violence is not to me, not yet. But there's still violence, right? So giving into an emotion is giving into, and this is, I remember I was blown away by this when I had first heard it. So there's 3 pillars on which Hinduism stands, and most religions. And sure, there's more than 3 pillars, but the 3 main ones are self-control, brahmacharya, ahimsa, ahimsa with B, living with compassion, gentleness, and an intention not to hurt, usually translated as non-violence, and satya. Satya is truthfulness. So satyam, truthfulness, ahimsa, non-violence, and brahmacharya, self-control. So giving into fear and you run away, then you're not living a brahmacharya. Like there's no self-control there. It's like stay, deal. No, run away. And then when you give into anger, of course you violate ahimsa. And so pretty much with all the emotions, if you give in to them, then Satyam, Brahma, Ahimsa gets compromised. Whereas what did Ramchandraji do? Anger. There's violence, but doesn't act with violence. Even when Lakshman comes into the city of Kishkinda, twanging the bow is not violence. It's communicating very effectively. Don't mess with me. It's not violence, right? Like communication is also an art and a skill. It's very effective communication. And so, yeah, in stories, when we're seeing people and we're seeing personalities and we're seeing reactions, it's a constant mirror, like to us. How are we handling emotions? How much are we giving into them? And Lakshman delivers the warning, but Hanumanji, Sugriv says, I'll call the soldiers now. And already that shows that because Hanumanji, again, he's standing there so diligently, and he informs Sugriv that he's already rounded up the soldiers. But then now you know it's not Sugriv that's done it, it's Hanumanji that's done it. And so when they leave the palace, all the soldiers are already there. Like, because Hanumanji, and so to collect all the soldiers, also you must remember, the message would have had to be sent out 2-3 days ago. Because a lot of them are coming from a distance. And so you see Hanumanji's presence of mind. And this is seva. Right? He knew what had to be done. He already did it, even without being told. And why? Because Sugriv's not doing what has to be done. And so, and so who did Hanumanji do it for? Sugriv, because that's the king at the moment, or Ramji? It's what had to be done. Right? It's for both of them, because actually, of course, it's for Ramji because you want to end his suffering, and he's missing Sita ji, and it's for Sugriv because it was Sugriv's duty to be able to do it. So this diligence of Hanumanji, and this presence of mind of Hanumanji. And so all the soldiers come and they collect. And Ramchandraji describes Sita ji. And I don't know if we already did this bit when he's describing Sita ji. They remember that they had found some jewels. Did we tell this bit in the story? It's been too many months now. I don't remember. We did. And so they knew which direction that the aircraft had gone, south. So they knew that most likely it's gone south, but not to take any risk. And so the army was divided into 4, one sent north, one sent west, one sent east, west, and of course Hanumanji and his contingency, which had Angad in it as well, and Jambavan in it as well. So the contingency going south was already a very strong contingency. And then, but before this, when Sugriv runs into the cave to meet Ramchandraji to profusely apologize for his neglect of having done his duties, there's this interesting dialogue where Sugriv says to Ramchandraji, but you can't blame me because only God and Guru can help you to get out of all your desires. And which man hasn't been enamored by a woman that he gets lost in that indulgence and forgets Bhagwan? And then like, wow. Like, not, oh, sorry, I forgot. It's like, which man doesn't get lost in indulgence for the woman that they forget Bhagwan? An interesting dialogue. But that's exactly what happened, right? With Sugriv's case. Is it true for every single man? Probably not. Is it true for quite a few? Probably. And women are by no means exempt. Even though the physical urge may be slightly less, the idea of it gives happiness is not less. Whether male or female, the delusion that takes place in our mind, that physical gratification gives fulfillment and provides immense distraction, is true. It certainly does distract the mind. And because of the intensity of it, any desire can be so intense that it consumes us, any desire. Right? Sometimes you'll see people when they're driven in their career, that it's so consuming to get that particular deal, to get that particular promotion, to get that particular. And now recently, wow, Trump has created so much entertainment for everybody, right? And Elon Musk has joined the ranks to add to creating so much entertainment. And think of like the intensity of the desire with which he is changing the laws of the country, and the intensity of the desire with which Elon Musk is trying to change policies. whether it's to benefit them or to truly make the world a better place, but so much passion and energy and momentum behind that, whichever desire it is. Like, let's all go to Greenland. Now, whatever intensity of desire that is whatever his motive is, like the whole world now, bichara Greenland, looking at Greenland. So with one person desire can be so monumental that it can have a ripple effect and ramifications all through this planet. So too with any government. I mean, just Trump is entertaining, so we can use his example, but any government making any decision, and its phenomenal ramifications. Like Australia's passed that law now that children 16 and below cannot use smartphones. And so every other country is waking up and thinking, oh, and already I was in Singapore last week, and so many schools in Singapore have implemented the children under 16 not allowed smartphones. Yeah, it's an awesome law. I'm sure children under 16 don't think so. But then, we don't allow them alcohol. We don't allow them to get married. We don't allow them to vote. We don't allow them to drive. So it's okay. One more thing they're not allowed. And so even that, okay, so that the desire of parents or adults to be able to save children from this ridiculous addictiveness to this gadget. And one of the 4 leading arguments there is Steve Jobs never gave his kids a phone. Just ruined everyone else's kids. Didn't give his kids a phone. Desire for a parent to save the innocence of their kid. Look at the strength of that desire. Yeah? But now these desires come with a certain amount of conviction, especially in terms of making the world a better place. Kids they should be kids for a while, no? Not just be stuck on the screen. There's so much vision in that, and there's so much commitment to higher thinking with that kind of a desire. And so whatever desire politicians have, maybe with that same intention of making the world a better place, or maybe it's some incredibly selfish desire for them to have more power. Either is possible, and we've seen both over the course of history. But lust is a little bit different to all these desires. So every desire can be consuming. But lust, physiological chemical changes that happens in the body, is like no other desire. So that desire of that parent to get rid of mobile phones will not have a physical chemical reaction in the body that's as drastic as the chemical reaction that happens in the body when there is lust. And, whichever selfish politician is running after power will not have a physiological reaction, which is as strong as the chemical reaction in the body for lust. And so when Sugriv says that lust is, which person hasn't gotten deluded by it? This is something, well, Sugriv saying it as an excuse, but it's something that has actually been said in the scriptures over and over and over again. That there isn't a person that doesn't get deluded by it. Now, when you get deluded by it, it's not that you're going to be deluded by it your whole life. Usually you get deluded by it while that chemical change is there in the body. So the chemical change already changes the way we think. And then it doesn't last. It can't last, fortunately. And then your thinking goes back to normal. And then mostly people get very ashamed of what did I do? But to not give in to it at that point in time is that incredible strength that we strive for. And so it's coming back to that we don't give into fear, we don't give into anger, we don't give into lust, inappropriate situations where it's healthy, but not when other things need to be done. Then we do what's more important to be done. But interesting that Sudhir has this whole discussion with Ramchandraji, pointing out our weaknesses. And Ramchandraji just listens. And what's interesting about it is not that he's pointing out our weaknesses, is that he is so informed in them. And it's a reminder to us that these Vanaras weren't just monkeys in the forest. They were highly educated because they were the devatas that have come to take form. And so even when Bali was dying in Ramchandraji's hands and he's talking about death and he's talking about dharma, he was highly educated. And so we're doing an injustice. When we call the Vanaras monkeys, we're doing an injustice. They were very intelligent. That's what we understand as monkeys today, is not to be seen as what they were. So now, they are setting off, and this is a very sweet part of the Ramayana. Ramchandraji gives Hanumanji his ring. As when you find Sita Ji, this is how she will recognize that you're my messenger. We have to remember Sita Ji's never met Hanuman. Right? She would recognize Lakshman, but Lakshman won't read Ramchandraji. And so when Hanuman goes in front of Sita Ji, how will she know? How will she know that this really is Ramchandraji's messenger? So he gives two things. He gives this ring. But even when you have a physical object, it's not proof necessarily that this person is the person who they say they are, because you could have taken, right? Like Sita Ji also threw her jewelry down and somebody else can now be holding her jewelry. In the same way, and actually this when she sees Ramchandraji's ring, because Hanumanji drops it from the tree, her first thought is, who's harmed Ramchandraji and taken the ring? Right? And so the ring can be taken from him. And so here you see Ramchandraji's presence of mind. He doesn't give only the ring, he gives a message. And he describes the incident of Jayant. Did I already tell the story of Jayant, the crow? Yeah. Jayant is Indra, not Indra. Somebody's son. Indra's son, maybe? Indra's son. And he wanted to test Ramchandraji. So he pokes at Sita Ji's foot until she bleeds. And then Ramchandraji plucks a piece of grass, turns it into a Brahmastra and throws it at this crow. And then he, of course, runs all over trying to get someone to save him, and nobody can. So he bows down to Ramchandraji. Ramchandraji says, bow down to Sita Ji. And then he says, but the arrow has been thrown. So now it has to destroy something. And so tell me what to destroy. And he says, my one eye. That's why crows can only see. But this story was there. This incident has happened. And so he narrates this incident to Hanuman to say that when you meet Sita, you remind her of this incident, then she will know. Because only the two of us were there when this incident had happened. And she'll know that you are indeed my messenger. And so off they go. And so then Guruji says, when, in the beginning, when they start their journey, then the Vanaras, like anybody they see, they'll say, Rakshasa, Ravana, and then they'll catch him and they'll beat him and they'll kick him and he's on the ground, bruised, battered, bleeding, and they'll say, oh, he can't be Ravana. Because we defeated him too quickly. Like Ravana would have been more stern. And then they were walking again, and then somebody else comes around and Ravana. And so 5 monkeys jump on this one poor guy. And then he can't be Ravana because he's like starts crying immediately that they've all jumped on him. So when they start their journey, there's this gusto of, we're going to find Ravana now, and we're going to destroy Ravana, we're going to get Sita ji back for Ramchandra ji. And then as the journey continues, maybe 2 weeks later, they're all like, like I can't even hold themselves. They're dragging their bags on the floor, and then somebody would scream, "Jai Shri Ram!" And everyone like, "Jai Shri Ram!" And maybe I'm describing it a bit more humorously, but Guruji says that when we start our journey, we start with such, but that gusto dwindles so fast. And so here, Hanumanji is really, as a leader, the leadership qualities you see in how Hanumanji handles this whole, shall we call it an excursion of how to find Sita Ji, is amazing. And even as a leader, he'd never stood in the front. Angad's the crown prince. So Angad stood at the front. And Jambavan is elderly. And so Jambavan, and he was at the back. Why? Because these people are so slow now. You need to make sure that they keep from the back. He keeps pushing them to keep going and helping the ones that maybe are a little bit slower or weaker. And so you just this incredible presence of mind. And really, like throughout the Ramayana, just there's no looking for glory. He's just not at all interested in position and power. He was always just interested in being able to do what needs to be done. Are they here for us? Are they just on route? Now, when they're walking, Hanumanji's presence of mind, like so, everybody else is just walking now, and they've even forgotten why they're walking. And we do this sometimes. We start off on the journey, and then there's just momentum up, and then we not only we become tired, we even forget what it is that we're supposed to be doing. Whereas Hanumanji's noticed that all the monkeys are tired and they're thirsty, and there's these birds flying out of a cave, and they have little droplets of water on them. So obviously there's water in that cave. But they're walking and everybody's thirsty. But nobody else notices this. Only Hanumanji noticed this. And so here too you see that he's not the leader from standing in front. He's the leader because he's paying attention and he knows what the need of the troops are, and he's delivering to that needs of the troops. And so he suggests, let's go to this cave where these birds are coming out from. And they all go into this cave. And it's like a little paradise. Like the description given of this cave would equal like in one of these fantasy movies of like, it's like this little haven. So there's a waterfall in this cave and there's a river and it's going down. And there's like orchids of fruit trees in this cave filled with so much fruit and flowers and all of this in this cave because there's this yogini, Swayamprabha, meditating in this cave. And so her stage and tapasyacharya, that everything in this cave is so lush and vibrant and full. And where there's no outside of the cave, nature's not so flourishing. But she's sitting there and she's meditating, and so everything is flourishing. And so when they go in, the monkeys, of course, see water and they just go running. But Hanumanji is like holding them and they're like, this is not ours. We have to get permission. She's here. She's meditating. This all belongs to her. And so even there, like, when there's desire and it's so easy to just, especially when it's a desire that's as instinctive as thirst and hunger to just give into it. But that presence of mind to be able to ask her. So this character of Swayamprabha comes into the Ramayana barely. Even in Puja Guruji's write-up, she's one page. Not even a full page. She's just sitting there. Then she's going to do this incredible feat. She's like one of the most powerful yogis that you hear of. Now we know that the rishis had siddhis, but we don't see stories of their siddhis. We just know that the rishis have siddhis. And even maybe with Veda Vyasa, we can see that he had Vishwarupa Darshan and, he had Divya Drishti because he could hear the entire Gita, right? So he's not on the battlefield, but he can hear the Gita. And so Siddhi. Even when he wrote the Mahabharata, apparently Ganeshji is sitting in a different cave to him and they're talking telepathically. And so, with Veda Vyasa, you hear this ability for him to know what's going on, even if he's not physically present. But otherwise, not so much siddhis. We know that siddhis exist, but we don't really hear stories of these siddhis. But here, there's this yogini, Swayamprabha, sitting in this cave in the middle of the forest, and her power gets shown to this nth degree. So firstly, the monkeys are so excited to be able to have access to all this fruit and all this water, and so they eat. And then, of course, when you eat too much, you're going to get sleepy. So now they're all sleepy. And anyways, they're already exhausted because they've been traveling. Well, to be fair to them, they would probably have been traveling a month or two by now. Takes a while. If you're traveling on foot across India, it's going to take a while. Kishkinda, if I'm not mistaken. So Ayodhya is like north near Delhi side, right? A little lower, but still. Then Kishkinda is even lower, right? But they have to go all the way to southern tip. They have to go to Chennai, sea coast, where Rameshwar is. That's where they end up. So it's quite a long walk if you're walking. Seeing them all tired and understanding who they are, that they finding Sita ji for Ramchandra ji, and being a yogini, understanding who Ramchandra ji is, she closes her eyes and tele-transports them twing, from the cave to the shores of the ocean. So she saves them like a month or two of walking. Now, you can tele-transport yourself. Wow. That's like phenomenal mental power. And in terms of powers, how power goes, even, something small like this, the mic. And I have to tele-transport it to somewhere. Takes immense power. What has she done? Some 100 monkeys, all in one go, in a matter of a few seconds. Chwing. Look at her mind. Look how phenomenally strong she is to be able to do that. And most people don't even know she exists in the Ramayana. Like most people will hear the story of the Ramayana, and it's Sita got kidnapped by Ravana, and Ramchandraji went to go find her, and Hanuman came along and helped. And most people won't even know the other smaller characters like Sugriv and who built the bridge, Nala and Neel, and Swayamprabha. So hardly anyone will know. But look at her phenomenal power. And what's she doing? Just meditating in a cave. That's all she's doing. But that's not all she's doing. Because she's meditating in the cave, there's vegetation. And because she's meditating in the cave, there's water. And there's her ability to help. It's and when we teaching the Ramayana, there's so little about Sita ji that can be said in terms of story. But we see that there's these phenomenal other characters who are women in the Ramayana. Even though their incidences are so small, they're such incredibly powerful, dynamic women. I think I mentioned this when we spoke about Tara also, right? Like her foresight and her resourcefulness, and then to have that mind, which in grief can absorb this knowledge of. I don't think I told you the discussion that Ramchandraji has. So Tara's overwhelmed with grief that husband Bali has been killed. And then Ramchandraji says to her, "What are you grieving?" And she says, "My husband." And she, exact words is that the body, are you grieving the body? Because the body is made up of 5 elements. Would you grieve 5 elements? We hear it. We've already heard that. So many times we've heard that. But she gets moksha. Like you guys, up your game here now. But how much tapas she would have done for her mind to be so receptive? Because this point that he's saying is not anything new. Anybody who studied the Vedas already know this. Body is made up of 5 elements, and at the point of death, 5 elements return to 5 elements. It's not only Hinduism. They say that in the Christian funeral ceremony, right? Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. I mean, it's just, even if you're not religious and you're just a farmer, what's the body? And it's not new knowledge. And yet when she hears it, and she hears it being said by Ramchandraji, and the question is, what are you grieving? Because these 5 elements that made his body are still here. So what are you grieving? And the soul is ever alive. So what are you grieving? And enough for her to be able to awaken to that highest truth and not feel grief. Can you, in that moment, like many people will not feel grief after the course of time, but to be able to hear something in that moment of immense grief and no longer feel the grief was Tara's mind. And here we see Swayamprabha, her mind is so incredibly strong. And it's sad that we measure strength in terms of power of siddhis, but it's because it's measurable. Like somebody else's mind is strong and we can't measure it because they control their anger, and we won't know they control their anger because they control it. Now, how to know they have a strong mind? But here she has transported 100 monkeys just using the sheer power of her mind. It's measurable. You can measure the distance that she transported them you can measure the number of monkeys and how big they were, because they were not ordinary monkeys, also they vanaras, right? So including Hanumanji. And so it's something that's tangible, that can be measured, and so we get impressed. But we are foolish that we get impressed by only things that are measurable. That person who controlled the anger and we didn't know that they controlled it because they controlled it, we should be impressed. Oh, and we just saw Ramchandraji, right? Just now we saw that he controlled his anger and he didn't give into it. And we think, yeah, of course he didn't give into his anger. We like delusion. This Swayamprabha is described as a yogini. She just lived there in this cave in solitude. But because of her, everything radiated with life and beauty and dynamism. And so they've all been transported to the shores of India. But they can see Lanka. And the coastal line keeps changing. I don't think in today's world we can see Lanka from India. But also the monkeys couldn't see Lanka from India. Sampati could. Who's Sampati? A vulture. Their eyesight is supposed to be significantly better than humans. So who's Sampati? Earlier we saw another story of a vulture, Jatayu. And this is Jatayu's brother. And I've seen cartoons of this fit in the Ramayana, and they show Sampati as some really annoying old man. Even they make his voice. They really make his voice like that. Like, why did they have to make his voice like that? I don't understand. I think kids watch these cartoons also. I don't understand. We will not use that voice for Sampati. But Sampati will tell the story. He's burnt his wings, and so he cannot fly. And so now suddenly 100 monkeys just appear in front of him because she's teletransmitted her. And so his first comment is, "Oh, dinner has arrived." And the monkeys, having just had this incredible feast and being looked after by Swayamprabha, instead of being filled with gratitude when they hear this comment, they're like, oh, there was one vulture who, fought Ravana to save Chinmaya and served Ramchandraji. And now here there's this vulture who wants to eat us before we can even find Chinmaya. And the minute he hears Jatayu's name, he's willing to talk. So what happens between them? We'll see next week because it's a bit longer, the story. So in this journey, there's lots of small lessons. And I don't think I've covered all of them, but mainly the main ones. Any questions? No. You'll have to do so much tapas, you'll have to climb 11 floors. Then we had so many Wi-Fi difficulties. But y'all got to hear about Swayam. So we'll continue next week, whether lift is working or not, Wi-Fi is working or not. We shall continue. Sarve bhavantu sukhilah, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkhapat bhavet, asato ma satgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, Mrityurma Amritam Gamaya. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Hari Om.